It is the Matt Mosley's Obstructed View podcast. And also, you'll hear us on ESPN Central Texas, the Matt Mosley Show. And that man you're seeing right now is one of the legends of the game. And that's Tony Franklin. And Tony, it is a pleasure to have you today. And one of the most I would say I think you could make a strong argument, the greatest kicker in SWC history, I was a little surprised to hear. I mean, I always assume you're in every Hall of Fame, and you are in a lot of them. But SWC Hall of Fame, your induction happens later this month, August 13th. So congratulations on that. And it's fun having you on the show, man. I've really looked forward to this.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Matt. I'm looking forward to visiting with you. It's always fun to talk to people that remember such an old guy like me. So it's kind of fun for me too.
Yeah, well, you don't look too old, so you're doing something right. Maybe it's all the hunting you do down near Junction, that kind of thing. But you aren't. I saw your age. You're not, but it is amazing to think back to and you're one of the real innovators when it comes back and goes to kicking. First of all, when you got the call from the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, Jay Black's a good friend of both of ours, that you were already in the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. I think that happened maybe back in like 2015, if memory serves correct. But this is the 2019. Okay. Yeah. I would have put you in there about 1980, but that's okay. We're making up for lost time. But the SWC. Let's think about just the fact that, again, now you're a dyed in the wool Aggie, as you can see with that shirt you have on there. So I'm sure you've enjoyed the whole SEC move, and now here come the Longhorns. They can't live without y'all. But the SWC still has for those of us of a certain age, and I would say, well, really anybody 45 or over, it's like I can't quite let go of it. Those were unbelievable days. So when you got that call, you're going into the SWC Hall of Fame, what were some of the memories that started kind of flooding back to you? Because again, you're there at A&M in the 70s. You get there, 1975 or 76?
75.
And I mean,
yeah.
1975. And that was, I'm thinking back, Tom Wilson, I guess, is there at some point. Emery's there. So
Emery
I'm trying
was
to think.
The head coach.
Okay.
Tom was the offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm.
I got you. What was the, where else did you think about going, by the way? And as you were kind of making that decision, because obviously you were an elite high school kicker.
Well, it's a real interesting story. I was born in Big Spring, Texas. I'm a West Texas kid, and I had actually, we had moved to Fort Worth, and I went to junior high and high school in Fort Worth, and I was actually a big Texas Tech fan. And it was interesting. Texas Tech wouldn't even talk to me about going to school there. And the only real full scholarship offers that I had, and this was after I was all state and all of this, and everybody at that time weren't interested in offering kickers full scholarships. They wanted them to come walk on, and if they did good, then they would provide them with a scholarship. Well, TCU recruited me really hard. Of course, I went to high school there in Fort Worth, and I played high school ball with Mike Renfro, and Mike went to TCU, and he hosted me on my recruiting weekend to go visit TCU, and the Horns came in and played TCU and beat them 81-16. And I politely told them that I really didn't want any part of that. Thank you very much. And nothing against TCU. They were just severely outmanned then, because then, it was unlimited scholarships, and Texas got all the really good first and second team players across the state. And the only other full scholarship I received was from New Mexico State. They wanted me to punt, kick, and play defensive back. And I politely told them no. I was very fortunate. I was all district and all county as a free safety. And But I just felt like there wasn't a real big demand for a 5'8" 160-pound free safety. So I just decided to do the kicking route. And after that, I just kind of waited. I guess I was going to be left with either walking on somewhere. OU wanted me to walk on. Nebraska wanted me to walk on. Never heard from any of the other Southwest Conference teams. I take that back. SMU was interested, then they signed some other guy, and he never even played a down there. And right about 2 weeks before the signing deadline, Melvin Robertson, our defensive coordinator, came down to my high school and said, we're prepared to offer you a partial scholarship. And I said, well, Coach, if I come, I want a full ride like everybody else. And he went back and brought that back. And then Coach Dean Campbell and Emory Ballard came down, and Emory said, Antoine, gosh darn it, I'm going to offer you the opportunity to be the first full scholarship kicker in the history of Texas A&M. And I had never even visited the campus, and I just committed right there on the spot. And I said, Coach, you know what? I'm in. Because we started watching, my dad and my two brothers, we'd watch the Emory Ballard show on Sundays after the Saturday game. So I got a lot of indoctrination into the fan base and the traditions and stuff like that. So we were all kind of pumped about that. Plus my dad's boss was an Aggie, and he helped sway us. So it was the best thing that probably could have happened to me at the time. And I got a lot of great opportunities from Coach Ballard to kick. And I met my wife there. And if I'd have gone somewhere else, no telling what would have happened. But if I had to do it all over again, I would go right back to it. Period.
Well, we've joked, the guy I always get mixed up with, people of a certain age, my name has to be Mark, right? Because my last name is Mosley. Right. And so several years before you get there, Mark Mosley was doing the straight on kicking. And I think he went to SFA after A&M and right. Certainly and went on, by the way, to be an MVP in the NFL, which is still amazing to me. Circa one of those years, it's like, I forget exactly what happened. We don't see too many kicking MVPs, but I think Mark Mosley actually did that. I'm kind of wondering though, you really started a trend. When was the first time did you always kick barefoot? Like, how did you learn it? When did you first learn that you were really good at this? Was there like you said, you played a lot of sports, it sounds like, and you were a really good athlete as well as a kicker, all that. But when did you first have a go at it and realize that worked for you, kicking barefoot? Because in a sense, seems like you were part of a whole movement there in the 1970s.
Well, it's an interesting story. I was playing in a high school pickup touch football game after my freshman year. And I went up and caught a pass, and I came down on a guy's foot, and I rolled my left ankle all the way under and tore all the ligaments in it. So I was in a cast for about, I want to say 8 to 10 weeks. Couldn't do anything. And when I got out of the cast, I couldn't run really well. So I just started fooling around at the end of practice. And varsity, we would practice in the mornings. Of course, I couldn't. And so I would just go down in the end zone, on the varsity practice field. And I just started fooling around kicking. I fixed myself up a coat hanger with a loop in the end of it. And I had a long piece sticking straight up that I taped to the top of it, and a weight over it to hold the ball in place. And I just started kicking straight on, and it was ugly. It was real ugly. Then I tried it soccer style, and I would make about 3 out of 10 from 35 yards. And for some reason, something just snapped in my head and said, why don't you take your shoe off? And I took my shoe off, and lo and behold, I was able to bend my foot at a different angle, and I was hitting the ball in the same spot every time. And I was getting a lot more lift and a lot more power. So I started making 10 out of 10 from 35, 10 out of 10 from 40. And that's moving from hash, to the other hash. And then I was 14 years old. And all of a sudden, coach was watching me, and I made like 8 out of 10 from 50. He's like, "What is this?" So, and I wore a sock, no big deal. And so we were fixing to go into the district schedule that year, and Coach Pretty said, "Come down and see me after the pep rally." So I did, and I would punt some too, and I punted the ball actually pretty good. But he said, I went down the field house, and he opened this big door and said, "Pick yourself out a jersey." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're going to punt and kick for us tonight." And we were going to play Fort Worth Northside, who was picked to win the district. And we played them. And, I ended up kicking 2 field goals, 36 and 40 yards, and we ended up playing by 6 points. So, and then later on that year, we played Southwest High School, and I ended up kicking a 51-yarder in that, which was the Fort Worth city record. And then a blast from the past, you'll remember this name, Uwe von Schaman came into Fort Worth Eastern Hills, and he kicks a 52-yarder my senior year. And we played them in the bi-district championship, and I kicked a 58-yarder, which was the state record at the time. That kind of pretty much got people to pay a little bit of attention more to my kicking skills than my defensive back skills. And from there on.
Boy, that is amazing, because it's like, the Cowboys had that guy that was a kicker at Notre Dame and went out, and he kind of, people come to this differently, but to find out from all, like you say, having some downtime,
yeah,
and discover that you're really great at something. I mean, think about that. If we're not for the injury, we may never have heard about Tony Franklin.
It was divine providence, brother.
So when did the sock come off? So the sock.
Well, you'll appreciate this story. I started as a freshman at A&M, and you'll appreciate this story, which I love to this day. We were ranked number 2 in the nation, undefeated all year. And Texas was ranked number 5, and they come into Kyle Field, and I'll never forget it. We only had 2 decks and a small horseshoe at the north end zone, so they put 3,000 folding chairs on the center track to seat more people, to be able to get 58,000 people in that stadium. We beat Texas 20-10, and I think we held Earl Campbell to like 18 yards on 34 carries. I mean, we had one heck of a defense that year. And I wore a sock then, and then we get ready for spring training, 2-a-days and all that. And of course, you know how things are in the Brazos Valley sometimes. They get a lot of rain, and it rained so much that Billy Pickard got tired of giving me dry socks. He said, "Why don't you just take the damn thing off?" So I did, and I started kicking without a sock, and that was it. I never put one on again.
Wow. And early on when you started doing this, was it leaving huge bruises, and
No.
was it hurting, or it never did? It was
really
pretty natural.
It never really bothered me. The only time it ever really bothered me was 3 football games that I actually played in, 1 in college and 2 in the pros. We played Texas my senior year in Austin. The temperature the day before Thanksgiving was like 58 degrees. And, you get used to the weather when you're out practicing in it every day. But a blue norther came through, and the temperature was about 34 the next day, and you'd have no chance to get acclimated to it. And brother, that was like kicking a cannonball. That's the only time it ever bothered me, other than the 1980 NFC Championship game. We played Dallas and in Philly, and the chill factor was -33. It was cold, brother. And then we played my last game that I played with the Eagles. We played St. Louis and St. Louis, and the entire AstroTurf field at Busch Stadium froze solid. That's the only time I didn't ever have to kick an extra point. Luckily, they shut us out. I only had to kick off 1 time, and I wore a shoe just to be able to keep from slipping and falling on my face.
Oh my
It was cold.
goodness.
It was cold.
Yeah. One, you were able to go on and kick in 2 Super Bowls, had a long NFL career. When when people started seeing you have success with the Barefoot, like did a bunch more people start trying it? I'm just kind of
Oh,
curious.
yeah.
Had you seen a few people do it before you
No,
gave it a go? Okay.
no, not a single solitary soul. But like the next four kickers at A&M after me, including my brother, kicked barefoot. And it was kind of the Aggie thing, I guess. But then you got a few more guys in the pros. And the only reason really is because when we were playing on AstroTurf, if you remember, the soles of the shoes were those big, thick waffle stompers, and they were so rigid, you couldn't flex your foot to be able to hit it the spot that you needed to hit it. And I used to hit the ball on the top of my foot where punters hit the ball. So the big bone there always absorbed all the shock and it never hurt or anything like that. Well, I couldn't bend my foot to be able to hit that. So that's why I took the shoe off. So there was a bunch of guys in the NFL that did it, but Alan Cannon is so funny, our sports information director.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I see him, he always goes, "Hey, it's the man that changed the game of football." So why do you say this? Well, you kicked barefoot and you kicked him a long way. You made Grant Taft want to change the rules.
did,
And he
did
did.
coach
Oh, yeah.
did Coach Taft made him put he did
Yeah.
he lobby for that to make
Big
kickers
time.
have to wear a shoe?
No, it wasn't that. No, and I got another story. Grant was, I kicked my two longest field goals against Baylor in the same game. The NCAA record was 63, and I kicked a 64 in the second quarter and a 65-yarder in the third quarter at Kyle Field against Grant. And he was madder than stomped his hand. And but here's the thing that I didn't understand. Bubba Hicks kicked some 60-yard plus field goals at Baylor. Why didn't he have them change the rule then? You know what I'm saying? But I guess he just didn't like the fact that maybe it was done to him. So I don't know. Grant's a good guy. I bear no malice or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of interesting.
But just so people understand,
actually the guy that wanted to ban me from kicking barefooted was Tex Schramm of the Cowboys, the general manager of Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
He kicked a 59-yarder against him on Monday Night Football, and he didn't like that at all. And he lobbied and lobbied and lobbied. And Pete Rozelle said he doesn't have to wear a shoe as long as he conforms to the uniform rule, which means that I have to wear a sock on my right foot that shows the team colors. I can kick barefooted. So what I basically did was cut all the white off the sock, and I had the green and the gray up around the top of my calf where you could see it plainly, and I was good to go.
All of that's fascinating to me. Now go back to real quick because I want to know. I'm fascinated with that change they made because at some point you're kicking. When did it go from like you could have a tee out there, then it goes to the ground, and obviously you didn't have the benefit. Now they have kicking balls, and they're able to really work those things in, and the kickers get them like they want. They didn't really have anything like that for y'all, did they?
No, except I still say to this day, Steve Little and Russell Archlaven was my competition, and I used to watch them, the balls that they always kicked in the game. Russell tied his toe up and Little kick soccer style, but they'd bring these old pumpkins into the game, and those balls would go 9 miles. And they were all, and they would use a tee. I always kicked them. We always kicked the new footballs that were always in the game. They would put new footballs into the game to start the game, and those are the ones I kicked. And when I went to the NFL rule was no tee. And I kicked off of a 2-inch tee, but I never had a problem getting the ball up or anything like that. Little lasted a year and a half, and Erxleben never kicked in the NFL. He lasted, I think, 2 or 3 years as a punter, but they couldn't kick those big pumpkin balls. And I was used to kicking the new balls, and I had no problem. So I think, unfortunately for them, that was probably one of the biggest factors to their early demise in their careers. You can't kick the old fart fat balls now, you know.
Man, those names you just mentioned, that's kind of wild, isn't it? That Russell, I mean, I just remember hearing those numbers, years later.
Yeah,
I go to Baylor, I show up on the Baylor campus about 91, and
yeah.
all of y'all's like records, nobody had ever, usually these records, somebody's going to surpass it, right? Somebody's going to hit this or that. And like those were still to this day, those things kind of reign even with all the technology, kicking balls, whatever. And did that group of kickers, did y'all kind of drive each other? Do you feel like you were kind of
Oh, I think there's
motivated by
no,
each other?
yeah, we were always trying to one up each other, you know. That's the nature of competition, which makes it so great. You know? They kicked 67 yardage and broke my NCAA record, which is fine, but I still hold the record for the longest field goal kicked in a bowl game, 62 yards in the Sun Bowl. And, so, I've got 3 over 60 in my career, 2 in the same game. Still, nobody's ever done it.
What did you, on those extremely long kicks, did you do anything? Did you change your mechanics? Is it like to people that, maybe are golfers that want to get up there and try to get a few extra yards? Was there anything from your approach or anything you changed to make sure, because obviously on those long ones, the ball doesn't always, you got to drive it. So maybe it doesn't pop up as quickly as some of those shorter ones. What was your mindset on those extremely long ones?
I always tried in my entire college career and professional career was to try and hit a 50+ yard field goal the same way that you kick an extra point. Use the same mechanics. I'm about a 6 handicap golfer, and I sometimes, like everybody, but if you try and hit the ball too hard, 2 things are going to happen. If you really try and go at it, you're either going to go at it too much, throw your mechanics off, you're going to drop your right shoulder, which means you're going to cut yourself off and you're going to pop it up short to the right. Or you're going to try and go at it so hard, you're going to lean over too far to the left and you're going to snap hook it. So you got to swing the same every time. And that's what I tell all these kids that I help learn to kick. You got to get to a point where you hit it in the same spot of your foot every single time. It's just like a golf shot. And, kicking, I guess what helped my golf swing and actually helped my kicking is it's all rhythm and timing. You got to hit it in the sweet spots. You got to use the same mechanics. You got to line it up the same way every time. And that's probably the biggest thing that I always tried to do, other than when you're standing there. When I was about to kick those 2 kicks against Baylor, it was, hey, make sure you do this right. You may not never get, you may never get another opportunity to kick one this long. And what was really funny is the first one I hit from 64 against Baylor, it just barely snuck over the juncture between the left upright and where the crossbar meets. It just snuck over barely. But the one I kicked from 65, I laughed. I was talking to Gary Green. He was always a good friend of mine. He said, man, all I could do was just stand there and watch that sucker soar through there. It probably would have been actually good from about 70. That's probably football I ever hit in my life. I just absolutely stone cold crushed that one.
A couple of years after Gary and y'all were playing, Baylor had some guys in the late. Well, it might have been around that time. I'm trying to remember. It's like Max McGarry, I think was the guy's name. There was always somebody on some team that was maybe good at blocking those things. And Baylor, right around 79 or 80, had a couple of guys, and McGarry comes to mind for some reason. There may have been somebody else, McElroy or somebody, but they were really good. So as a kicker, you got to just do what your job, right? But you also want to make sure the rest of the operation was good. Who was like, how? I mean, because that had to be. I mean, you've made a ton of field goals at A&M. I was stunned. I mean, it's like good news, bad news, right? It's like these drives weren't ending in touchdowns. but you were making a lot of field goals.
Right.
Who was your best holder? Who was your snapper along the time? Because that had to be a great operation.
I was very fortunate in my entire collegiate and professional career. The first 3 years I was at A&M, Matt Freeman was my deep snapper. He was very good, not a very big guy either. And my first 2 years, unfortunately, both of my holders at A&M are both passed on. Was David Shipman, a quarterback that went to Odessa Permian, and David Beal, he was a quarterback from Arkansas. He from the state of Arkansas. They were both great holders. Professionally, you'll recognize this will be a blast from your past. I had the same snapper for all 10 years of my career. Guy Morris, who ended up being the head coach at Baylor, was my snapper. And let me tell you, we used to call him the professor because Guy had it down to a point where he had the rotations down where all the holder had to do was just catch it and set it. He never had to spin the ball. That's how good Guy Morris was. He was unbelievable.
Well, sadly, we lost Guy in recent years as well. But my goodness, yeah, it's funny, before we were talking yesterday, and after we got off the phone, I thought about it. I was like, well, I bet he played with Guy Morris, and sure enough,
you'll appreciate this, Matt. Guy was the starting center and deep snapper, and he finally got cut. He'd been there 10 or 11 years, and they went with the youth movement. Well, I had been traded to New England. Ron Meyer, the old SMU coach, traded him. He got fired, and Raymond Berry ended up being coach, the legend. Well, we needed a deep snapper, and I told Ron Meyer and Dante Scarnecchia, who spot. Well, when Pete Brock, our starting center, got hurt, Guy pitched in and played more at starting center. He even played guard when John Hanna got hurt. But mainly his job was to deep snap, and he was able to play another 4 or 5 years. And Raymond gave him his coaching start. So it was a unique situation.
Wow. And I think about those. So y'all would have been together both for the Eagles Super Bowl and the Patriots Super Bowl. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. I love all this. Tony, I knew this would be fun, but I'm thinking about this. You've seen the evolution of kickers. Okay. Like in punting, the Australians kind of had some impact, Darren Bennett and others.
Right.
But what we've seen in kicking, and I don't know if we want to go back to Sebastian Janikowski, but even before that, we started to see these big, massive guys, 6'3", 6'4", whereas in the 70s and 80s, I think back to even who was kicking Yepremian. I mean, a lot smaller guys.
The Barr brothers, Chris and Matt Barr, but they weren't giants either. Raul Allegri at Texas, he wasn't.
Yes.
It was just, just the way it is. But and the other thing I think that has made these guys these days so much better is that more attention has been placed on off-season programs. They didn't want us lifting leg weights because they didn't want us. They were afraid that it would tighten our muscles up. We'd lose our flexibility. And for me, that was probably, I used to be able to do the splits, no problem. Now I'm afraid they'd put me in the hospital. But I just tried to maintain my flexibility and just try and hit everything the same way every time. But these guys, you look at the bombs these guys are kicking now, they have dedicated trainers that do specific exercises for their legs and, their hips. They really work them on it. I wish we'd have had access to that stuff, but we didn't. But you know what? I'm just thankful I got an opportunity to play.
Yeah, I mean, so what was your height and weight when you were at A&M?
When I came to A&M, I weighed 158 pounds, and I was 5'8.5" tall. 5'8", 160.
And just generating that.
But I ran a 4.5 40.
Did you have a pretty good onside kick? Did you have any tricks of the trade back in the day? I'm sure y'all had time to work on different things, and obviously the rules have changed. Yeah.
I think out of the 10 onside kicks I ever tried, I think we recovered only one of them. But we went back in my day, that was the only time I had a square-toed kicking shoe, and you tilt the ball all the way back, and you make a run at it and kick the very top of the ball to get it to top over and spin and then hop real high. We didn't have any of these guys running down the middle of the field, blowing the other guys up. And the guy coming behind and just dragging his foot and moving it 10 yards and the kicker falling on it. That's been the most successful onside kick. Nobody had ever thought about that. But I worked on onside kicks, and I was one of the few guys these days, there's a lot of guys that don't even kick off anymore. I kicked off, and I guess one of the things I was most proud of is my entire career, I never had a kickoff return for a touchdown because I knew how to open field tackle from my days as playing safety.
So that's a good deal. Yeah. And I'm sure like that Baylor punter a few years ago, Sepulveda, if you got to him, you'd lay a lick on him. He kind of was a headhunter. He'd like to come down there and put a shot on him. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember the kid from Tech is a great big kid too. He kicked like a 60-yard field goal at Tech, but man, he was like 6'3", and man, these guys these days, they're just making them bigger, brother.
Yeah, I looked it up, by the way. Steve Sloan, who you would remember, was coaching at Tech.
Yeah.
In 1975, and we just lost Steve apparently not that long ago in April. He died, and but boy, the Red Raiders did miss out on a pretty good kicker out there.
It was funny. I laughed. Him, and we played Tech one year, and at the old stadium, I don't know if you remember it, but I was the only guy to ever kick a ball over the scoreboard at the north end zone out of the stadium, and then I kicked an extra point over the coach's office and locker room at the other one. And I laughed. Coach Sloan came up to me one time and said, "My God, those balls you kick are landing out there somewhere near Brownfield in Lamesa." And Jim Schaffner, he came up to me and warm up when he was coaching at TCU at Kyle Field. I was kicking 60-yard field goals, and he walked by me and said, "Man, we need to give you a saliva test and find out."
Oh my goodness.
He was a nice man. I got to rekindle my relationship with him when he was coaching the Bills. He was a nice nice man.
Well, I tell you, this has been fun. I know I happen to have a couple of young guys that I know that are going to their senior year in high school. One's at Jesuit, really good kicker. One's over at Lake Highlands, where my daughter goes, really nice, good young kicker. What is when you work with these young guys, and I'm sure knowing your reputation, any father of a kicker is probably trying to hunt you down. What's the kind of the biggest message you have to them? Is it that what you were talking about, just that consistency, finding the same, getting that repetition, almost like in golf? What's the biggest piece of wisdom you can share with young kickers when you work with them?
Make sure you mark your steps the same way every time. Because if you don't, if you just go back there hully-gully, I was a volunteer coach for Central Catholic last year here in San Antonio, and I coached a little freshman kid that kicked for the varsity, and he listened to me, and the little rascal didn't miss an extra point. He made 7 out of 10 in field goals, and he was like 15 years old, and he made honorable mention All-State. And the thing that I used to drum into his head was, you got the ability to do it. Clear your mind, but make sure you mark your steps the same way every time. That's the only way you're ever going to get to a point where you can hit it the same spot in the football every time. Consistency is the key. And that's what I would tell these guys. all these kids have got the weights and all the stuff that they can do, but you got to go back to the very basics. You got to keep your head still. It's just related to a golf swing. You got to keep your head down, your eye on the ball, mark your steps, set up the same way every time, and just hit it, swing at it the same way every time. And if you do that, you'll be consistent. You'll probably get a chance to play college football somewhere, maybe professionally later.
Well, Tony, the big ceremony is going to be at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame in Waco on the 13th. I'm sure you'll have some buddies and family, and everybody will be excited to see you go in there. And then I think there's still some tickets, that people could get, but I think they already have quite a few tables. I was just talking to Jay Black and some folks the other day, and talked to a guy who bought a table. So you just go to the Texas Sports Hall of Fame website. If people want to still try to get in there, I bet they would sell you a ticket. Tony, last thing, what are you doing these days? I know you're doing some hunting. You got some great land out there, ranch out there around Junction. What for all the Aggies and SWC people who'll be watching this? What did you do? What have you been doing? Since your professional career, and what did you focus on after your playing days?
Well, I retired, and then I went to work in the automobile industry. I was everything from a salesperson to a general manager of a dealership. But my niche was financing cars. I always loved financing, and I always had great relationships with all of my lenders, and would always take them to play golf and stuff like that. And I've worked for some pretty sorry car dealers, but I was fortunate at the end of my career to find a guy that is probably as good as there is in this business, by the name of Clarence Kalick. He owns all the North Park dealerships, and his word is his bond. He's a good Christian man, and I loved working for him. There isn't a finer man out there. So that's what I did, and I like to say I work on my golf game, and Sally and I have been married 43 years now, so we try and we've got 5 cats and a dog. Don't have any grandkids. I have 2 sons, and we kind of all interchange and take care of things. But I enjoy hunting. I enjoy just being able to sit up. I have a 10-foot tower blind out on my ranch, and I sit up out there, and a lot of times I'll just go sit in the blind, won't even take a gun. I just get up there and just like to watch them. And where I live in San Antonio, I had a 12-point buck in my driveway last night. I was feeding corn to, and we have a lot of deer in my neighborhood. So I'm just kind of an outdoor guy, and I love the game of golf. My parents, unfortunately, are no longer here. I wish they were here to be able to see this. And thankfully, my mother was alive when I was inducted into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. But it's all about my wife and my kids right now. So this is just another great honor that has been bestowed upon me. And, the good Lord's been awful good to me, and I'm very thankful for all the blessings he's given.
Well, I mean, I saw these names, and the 2 names that grabbed me in that class. It's a great SWC class, but I've been great friends for several years with Alfred Anderson from Baylor, and he was a massive star in high school at Richfield.
Alfred, Alfred, there are none better than him. I enjoy him very much. Every time I see him, we always have a good visit, and I think the world. He is as good a buddy as there is. I see him at a lot of NFL alumni events, and I see him at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame golf tournament every year. So it's always fun to see him, and I'm really happy for him being inducted also.
He's still a pretty imposing dude, isn't he? He's got those hands and everything.
He is, as my dad used to say, boy, I'm glad I didn't have that a food bill every month. Feeding that man. He's a big boy. He was a great player. He was a great player, and even a greater guy.
It was a great high school quarterback, believe it or not. And I would always thought that would have been interesting to see. I think he broke his hand or something, and that sealed the deal for being a running back. But he could have been a great quarterback, but boy, I appreciate you doing this, Tony. I mean, you are one of the true legends in whatever Hall of Fame you're in. You deserve it, and that whole group of y'all. And the guy that broke my heart right after you had gone pro was the guy that after at Arkansas, Baylor goes into Little Rock. They're playing at War Memorial Stadium. Baylor has Abercrombie and Gentry. They're still good, but they go up there and they get beat 42-41. And I think the guy who won it was his name Leahy, the kicker at Arkansas. Was it Pat Leahy or something like that?
Pat was playing for the Jets then. He was a couple of years ahead of me, so it wasn't Pat Leahy.
So this would have been about 81. Yeah. But anyway, I just remember
Pat's a good friend of mine. We used to have a great visit every time we played him. When I was with New England, we played the Jets twice a year because they were in our conference. And just like Mark Mosley, I'd see him twice a year because they were in my conference when I was in Philly. And if I had to do anything over again, I wouldn't change anything. And man, I've had such a great life, been so blessed. And I don't know what to say other than thank.
Well, thank you, Tony, for doing this. And as I told you, Mark Mosley has haunted me my whole life. And so finally, several years ago, I had him on my show. And so it was Mark Mosley comes on with Matt Mosley. And we were able to talk to him about all his Five Guys or whatever his burger place is. And so he's gotten into all that. But y'all both had unbelievable careers, both college and pro. So thank you for doing this, man. Have a great day, and we'll share this with all of Central Texas and the whole state of Texas for that matter. So I really appreciate you. And it is Tony Franklin on the Rogue Media Network, Matt Mosley's Obstructed View, and of course you hear him on ESPN Central Texas. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Matt. Take care of yourself, brother.
All right, I'll do it.
We are Rogue Media Sports.